Listen! I saw in his hand a long spear of gold, and at the iron's point there seemed to be a little fire. He appeared to me to be thrusting it at times into my heart and to pierce my very entrails. When he drew it out, he seemed to draw them out also, and to leave me all on fire with a great love of God. The pain was so great that it made me moan. And yet so surpassing was the sweetness of this excessive pain that I could not wish to be rid of it. Those are not the words of a poet. They are the words of a 44-year-old Spanish nun, writing down something that had actually happened to her body. A small angel with a burning face, a golden dart, a wound she described so precisely that 23 years later, doctors would cut open her preserved heart looking for it. They found it. Almost a century after she died, a sculptor named Bernini tried to carve the moment into marble, the Cornaro Chapel in Rome. The stone softens into cloth, a hidden window sends gold light pouring down over her. Her head falls back, her mouth opens, her feet leave the ground. But this is not where the story begins. To understand the angel with the spear, we have to go back almost 30 years before he appeared. Back to the city of Avila, high on its cold plateau, inside the walls of a Carmelite convent called the Incarnation. The year is 1554. Inside the oratory, a nun is kneeling before a statue of the wounded Christ. She has spent 20 years in prayer watching the hourglass, waiting for the hour to end. And tonight, without warning, her heart is about to break open. Come with me. Stand on the road below the city, look up. Avila rises out of the Castilian plain like something carved out of a single stone. 88 towers, 9 gates. 2.5 kilometers of wall, so old and so intact that walking beneath them today feels like walking beneath the 11th century itself. This is where she was born, this is where she almost died. And this is where, in a convent tucked inside those ramparts, she saw something that would change the architecture of the Western soul. Look closer now. If you let your eyes go soft, you can almost see it. A second castle, faint as breath on cold glass, hovering over the stone one. 7 rooms, 7 concentric walls, a single light burning in the innermost chamber. She will describe it, decades later, in words nobody had used before. I thought of the soul as resembling a castle, formed of a single diamond or a very transparent crystal, and containing many rooms, just as in heaven there are many mansions. That is the map she gave us, 7 mansions, the deepest one is where God lives. But before she could draw that map, she had to survive. Survive a childhood shadowed by the Inquisition. A near-fatal illness that left her paralyzed for 3 years. 20 years of prayer that felt like nothing. A papal official who called her to her face, a restless gadabout, a disobedient and contumacious woman. Spiritual directors who told her the visions were the work of the devil. This is her story. Teresa of Ávila. The pain was so great that it made me moan. Come inside. Start with a family secret. In the summer of 1485, an old man in the city of Toledo stood in a public procession, wearing a yellow garment stitched with black crosses. He walked from church to church, Friday after Friday, for 7 weeks. His name was Juan Sanchez. He was a Jew who had converted to Christianity, then been denounced by the Inquisition. He was Teresa's grandfather. She was born 30 years later, into a family that had bought its way into the minor nobility to bury that shame. She would grow up knowing, without being told, that her standing was fragile, purchased, conditional. She was a strange child. At 7, she talked her older brother Rodrigo into running away. Their destination, the land of the Moors, where they hoped to be beheaded for Christ and see God faster. An uncle caught them at the city gate. Asked why she had done it, she said, "I wanted to go to God, and one cannot do that unless one dies first. When martyrdom failed, she built little hermitages in the garden. They kept falling down. She had no mortar. Then her mother died. She was 13. She knelt before an image of the Virgin Mary and asked her, weeping, to take her mother's place. Adolescence followed, with its perfumes, its romance novels, its vanity, its cousins. At 20, she entered the convent, not from vocation, from fear. Leaving her father's house, she wrote later, felt, as if every bone in my body was being sundered. 4 years in, her body broke. A healer in a mountain village nearly killed her. She fell into a coma so deep they placed wax on her eyelids. They dug her grave. They waited. After 4 days, she woke. Her tongue was chewed to pieces. Her bones felt dislocated. She could not move. Paralysis would hold her for nearly 3 years. And when her body finally returned, the worst part of her life began. Not illness, absence. For nearly 20 years, she prayed and nothing happened. She sat in the oratory, more occupied with the wish to see the end of the time appointed, and in watching the hourglass. She was going through the motions, and she knew it. Then, in the spring of 1554, something broke. Lent the oratory, a statue placed there for the coming feast. The Ecce Homo, Christ scourged, bound, crowned with thorns, covered in wounds. She had walked past 100 such statues. This one stopped her. In her own words, I thought my heart was breaking. She threw herself to the ground. She wept. She refused to rise until grace had broken her open. 20 years of divided will ended before a wounded face. The emptiness was over. What came next would terrify her. After the wounded Christ, the voices began. Not in the ears, in the center of the chest. Words she had not thought, arriving fully formed, with an authority her own mind could not counterfeit. She told her confessors. They were alarmed. One of them, a well-meaning man, gave her an instruction that would shame anyone. When the vision came, she was to raise her hand and make the fig gesture at it. A crude insult, a way of telling the devil to leave. She did it, weeping, convinced she was spitting at her Lord. The visions did not leave, they deepened. She began to see him, not always with her eyes. Sometimes with what she called the eyes of the soul, a seeing that had no image, only presence. She would feel him walking beside her on her right side, as real as any living man and invisible. Then came the raptures. Her body would lift from the floor. In choir, she clutched the wooden bars of the stall to hold herself down, and still her weight seemed to leave her. In her own words, it seemed to me, when I tried to resist, as though a great force beneath my feet lifted me up. In 1559, the Spanish Inquisition banned mystical books written in Spanish. Teresa, who could not read Latin, lost her library in a single decree. She wept, and then she later wrote, Christ himself spoke to her. Don't be afraid, daughter, for I will give you a living book. The transverberation came soon after, the spear, the fire. She was no longer a nun with a secret. She was a mystic with a mission. So the voices came first, then the seeing without seeing. She would feel him present beside her, to the right, as real as any living man. No face, no form, a certainty brighter than daylight. She tried to describe it. She said it was like standing in a pitch-black room and knowing, without question, that someone was there with you. Only the knowing was sharper than sight. For 2 years, her confessors tormented her with the fear that all of this came from the devil. She obeyed every instruction, however cruel. She wept through each vision. She could not convince herself the presence was Satan, not if they cut her to pieces. Then 2 men stepped in who knew what they were looking at. Francis Borgia, once a duke, now a Jesuit, and the Franciscan ascetic Peter of Alcantara. Both told her the same thing: this is the Spirit of God, stop resisting. The dam broke. Around the year 1559, in her cell, an angel appeared at her left side. Small, beautiful, his face burning as if he were made of fire. In her own words, "I saw in his hands a large golden dart, and at the end of the iron tip there appeared to be a little fire. It seemed to me this angel plunged the dart several times into my heart, and that it reached deep within me. When he drew it out, I thought he was carrying off with him the deepest part of me, and he left me all on fire with great love of God. The pain was so great that it made me moan, and the sweetness this greatest pain caused me was so superabundant that there is no desire capable of taking it away." This is not a metaphor. This is a woman describing what happened to her body and her soul in language that had never existed before. And the experiences kept coming, harder, stranger, more public. She would be kneeling in choir and feel her weight leave her. She would clutch the wooden bars of the stall. She would order her sisters to sit on her, to pin her down, to hold her knees. I felt as if I were being torn to shreds, for it is a mighty struggle. She begged God to stop doing this to her in front of people. To levitate in Counter-Reformation Spain was to invite the rack. Witches levitated, frauds pretended to, saints were supposed to be discreet. She was not discreet. And here is the astonishing thing. She did not vanish into the ecstasy. She picked up a pen and then a set of keys and walked out of the cloister. For the last 20 years of her life, Teresa crossed Spain in covered wagons over rutted roads, sick, exhausted, often in pain so severe she could barely hold her head upright. She founded 17 convents, she negotiated rents, she argued with bishops, she recruited nuns. She hid the Blessed Sacrament in ruined houses at midnight so no one could stop the opening. In 1567, in Medina del Campo, she met a small, quiet friar of 25 named Juan. She knew within minutes what she was looking at, another mystic, a peer. With her usual dry wit, she said the reform of the men had finally begun. She had a friar and a half to start with. His full name would become John of the Cross. The Inquisition watched her every move. The Princess of Eboli, wealthy, vengeful, one-eyed, got hold of her autobiography, mocked it in her parlor, and sent it to the Holy Office. Teresa never saw the manuscript again. The papal nuncio himself dismissed her in a phrase that has outlived him by 5 centuries. A restless gadabout, a disobedient and contumacious woman who invented wicked doctrines and devotions. She kept going. She told her sisters that the Lord walks among the pots and pans, that God is found in kitchens as surely as in choir stalls. Holiness, she said, is not fragile. The story goes that one night, thrown from her wagon into a freezing, muddy river, she looked up and complained. The interior voice answered, "This is how I treat my friends." Her reply became legend. If this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few of them. She died on the night of October 4, 1582, her head in the arms of her companion Ana de San Bartolomé. When they opened her body, her heart bore a wound. 5 years before her death, Teresa sat down to write her masterpiece. She was 62. Her autobiography was still locked in the Inquisition's archives. Her head, she said, sounded like rushing water and whistling birds. She could barely hold a pen. In roughly 5 months, she produced the most detailed map of human consciousness ever written in the West. She called it the interior castle. I thought of the soul as resembling a castle formed of a single diamond or a very transparent crystal, and containing many rooms, just as in heaven there are many mansions. 7 concentric chambers. The king lives in the innermost one. His light passes through every wall of crystal, dimmer toward the edges, brighter toward the center. In the outermost rooms, the soul is newly awake, but surrounded by what she calls reptiles. Not great sins, just distractions, noise, the endless chatter of worldly life. By the fourth chamber, something changes. The soul stops doing the work. God starts working in the soul. Water that once had to be hauled in buckets now rises from its own hidden spring. The sixth mansion is where the storm lives. Rapture's wounds of love, the golden spear again. Teresa warns, almost pleading, that the nearer you come to God, the more the approach itself can tear you apart. And then the surprise. The seventh mansion is quiet. The raptures stop, the levitations stop. God is no longer a visitor who arrives and departs. He has moved in permanently, and the soul has finally grown large enough to hold him. Spiritual marriage is like rain falling from heaven into a river or stream, becoming one and the same liquid, so that the river and rainwater cannot be divided. The rain does not vanish, the river does not vanish. They are simply now the same water. And the proof, she insists, is not ecstasy, not visions, not miracles. The proof is works. Martha and Mary must walk together. Centuries before her, in Baghdad and Persia, Sufi mystics had described the same 7 concentric castles. Teresa could not read Arabic, she had never seen their books. Somehow the map was the same. A traveler stands outside the walls of Avila at dusk. The stone is the color of old bread in the fading light. 88 watchtowers, 9 gates. And faintly, just above them, if you know how to look, a globe of crystal shimmering in the air. 7 concentric rooms, the king at the center. Think about what this woman did. 20 years she sat in a dim choir, watching an hourglass, feeling nothing. Then light broke in and nearly tore her apart. She was investigated by the Holy Office, mocked by princesses, dismissed by a papal nuncio as a restless woman with wicked doctrines. She was nearly buried alive at 23. She wrote books so precise that 400 years later, scientists at Johns Hopkins would use similar categories to measure the effects of psilocybin. And she did not vanish into the light. She built 17 convents, a reformed order that still exists. A map of the soul so exact that Muslims and Jews and Hindus have recognized the same territory under different names. The proof of the innermost room, she said, is not ecstasy. The proof is ordinary work done with an open heart. She left one door unlocked for the rest of us, just one sentence, the simplest thing she ever wrote. Mental prayer, in my opinion, is nothing else than an intimate sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with him who we know loves us. That is the entrance to the castle. No spear required, no angel, no levitation. Just time, just silence, just the willingness to sit alone and listen. She said the soul is a castle made of crystal, with God living in the innermost room. She said most people never go inside. They live their whole lives in the courtyard. So the question she leaves you with, at the end of everything, is not whether her visions were real. It is simpler than that. What would it take to walk in?